Audrey Woolard here. Today this video is going to be about sharp shooting, and I know the header image here says Sharp Live Webinar, and we are obviously listening to a recording, but I wanted to just make sure that everyone knew I'm using the exact same keynote as I use in the live webinars. And so with those of you who have probably heard about the live webinars from friends, or you have seen the description of this particular course before, everything is the same. With the live one, the only difference between that one or course and this one is that this is going to be lifetime access. The other was recorded live, but you weren't allowed to ask a question, and you were able to watch a recording, but only for 5 days. So this is kind of a little bit of a bonus for you guys. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me just give some important notes. It's important to note that shooting sharply, sometimes it can if you're having issues with that, it can be several different issues. For some, it could be how you're focusing, how you are holding your camera, how you are positioning your subjects. It could be a whole host of those things that I've mentioned. It also can be a natural light thing if you guys are natural light shooters. Obviously, this one is not a natural light video. However, that could be an issue, and I'll touch on that just a little bit, but I can't really go too much into that just because this is not a natural light video. If that is something that you find might be your issue after I kind of discuss a few points, the total package webinars that I have up will be great for that, or you can pick one of the other single natural light courses that we'll have up in a couple days, or depending on when you purchase this, they might already be up. So on www.awteaches.com, we'll have all of the latest videos that I have up, and we'll be adding to those as we go. So definitely keep a watch out on that. Add it to your bookmarks, check on that, and see what we have new posted. So let's get started. I love to mention some questions that I tend to get a lot. So let's just lay all of that out. I don't use back button focus. I don't focus and recompose. I shoot JPEG, and when I actually started offering the Sharp course, this was last year. Actually, it was early, like January of 2016, and I was shooting JPEG all the time. Now I'm shooting a little bit more raw lately, so depending on when you see this, you can be like, wait a minute, Audrey, you're shooting raw. So I am shooting raw. It has nothing to do with shooting sharp. It has everything to do with how I've kind of changed up my editing a little bit, but it has nothing to do with natural light, shooting sharply, and all of that. So just in case you end up seeing that, I just wanted to give that clarification. But for those of you who do shoot JPEG, if you turn off all of the in-camera parameters, it doesn't really matter. Shooting JPEG is not going to automatically sharpen your pictures because it compresses it. If you can literally turn that off in camera. So if you're someone who edits your images in Photoshop or Lightroom, I would suggest you turn that off and do any of your sharpening in post. I use single point, and I toggle my focus point as I compose my image. Sometimes I hear people refer to this as spot focusing. I don't refer to it as that, but if you are someone who refers to toggling your focus point as spot focusing, there you have it, and that's what I actually do. And I think those are most of the disclaimers that I can think of. One that I didn't mention within this part of the keynote is that although yes, I don't back button focus and I don't focus and recompose, I just hit the shutter, focus, and then that's it. I don't do anything, different than that. I do use autofocus. I don't manual focus ever. So I think that gives all of the disclaimers. And one thing I think I'm going to mention later, I'm not really sure. Sometimes if I do this webinar a lot, I memorize all of the slides, but I haven't done one for a minute, so I'm not really sure if I mention it. But When we start talking about shooting in wide apertures, and yes, I shoot at f1.6, but I consider shooting wide anything f3.0 and under. So you don't have to shoot at a 1.6 or shoot as wide as the lens will go, which I kind of think is crazy, and I'll get more into that later, to get, a really nice blurred background. If you want to get something really nice and blurry, f2.0 is great. And I think what I didn't start off mentioning in the very first slide is that shooting sharply has everything to do with technique and very, 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 very little to do with editing. There is no way to edit a soft image and make it sharp. You need to nail what you need to nail right out of the camera, and you can enhance it in post, but the recipe is made the minute you hit that shutter. So it's all about technique and very, very little to do with editing. Many people thinks that it does have to do with editing, and you can tell the difference when you see their images. So here, I mentioned this a little while ago. The 3 categories that cause consistent soft images would be poor lighting, flawed shooting technique, as I kind of touched on earlier, and equipment failure. So you might find that you've got a lens that is not focusing the way that it should be, and it does it consistently, meaning, or for example, you might have something that back focuses where the sides, let's say you did a close-up and the ears or the sides of the hair are all in focus, and then the face just isn't in focus. That is a lens issue. You might be someone who toggles their focus points like I do, and I tend to toggle as I compose. And as I compose, because I compose in camera, I don't compose in post, meaning I don't choose how the image is going to be composed during post. I figure that out when I take the picture. So if you're toggling a focus point, you might find that you have a soft focus point. And that happens. It's happened to me. Cameras that I've just used and used and used until the wheels fell off of them. Some of those focus points, they go soft. Usually I just replace the camera, but you can, send it and get it fixed. So if you find that is the case, that you might like a certain composition, and then you wonder, hey, why are my images always soft when I'm composing like this? That might be your issue. Let's really talk about the importance of your stance. And what I mean by that is you might find that you are wagging your elbows a lot more than you think you are. There's so many things that add or cause camera shake. More often than not, you're not aware of it. It's just the way that you shoot. For myself, I'm very conscious of how I stand, what I'm doing, everything that I'm doing with my body, to the point now that it's very, very second nature. But when I'm photographing with other photographers in person, and I say, you know what, watch what I'm doing, watch how I'm holding my body, watch all of that, and they'll know that I really don't move my body around a lot. I'll find a spot, get my body nice and tucked in, and I'll kind of try to show you this to where it makes sense. But anyway, I really try to eliminate as much camera shake as I possibly can, just because I actually shoot very wide open. So here's my real stupid, silly drawing. I'm really big on my drawings here, but I kneel down a lot. So obviously I only drew one leg here, but I have one leg on the ground, one knee up. I tend to really anchor that elbow on my knees to the point sometimes I'm almost leaning to the side just a little bit. And that really gives me a nice anchor so that I can eliminate camera shake. One important thing, just so that you guys don't put me in a box and say, well, Audrey, you only photograph tweens and teens. If that might be because you're just following me. I'm in my 15th year, and I began my business chasing toddlers and babies. And I'd been there, done that. And I started shooting at f1.6 way back when I picked up a camera. And that was not just because I felt that wide apertures are pretty, and they were, but shooting as wide as 1.6 I think is insane. I do not choose 1.6 because it's the best aperture to use, but I broke my camera way back. I mean, when I was photographing my son, who was 5 at the time, 4 or 5 at the time, and he's now going to be 16 next week. So that's how long it's been. And my brand new camera broke on the aperture ring, and it was stuck on f1.6 when I was taking just candids of him. And being in true knucklehead form of Audrey Willard, I always like to just take on a challenge. And I was like, you know what? I'm using my camera regardless of that aperture ring being broken at 1.6. And I've literally never looked back. So I don't want you guys to be married to that. Prior to me breaking my camera, I used to shoot at like f2.2, f3.0. No, wait, 3. Yeah, around 3 point. I can't remember what it was, but that's how wide. F2.2 was as wide as I used to go until my camera broke. So anyway, getting back to the importance of the stance, I find myself in this position a lot just because of how I shoot. If I'm standing, I will try to find a wall or something to anchor myself on. If I'm unable to do that, and I'm in the middle of the sidewalk or something and there's no wall, I will tuck my elbows in regardless if that orientation of the camera is horizontal or vertical. Tuck both elbows in or one, so I'm not wagging my elbows around like a bird and your arms are flapping. That adds to camera shake more than you think. If you're photographing babies, do not chase them, or toddlers. Get mom and dad to do the chasing. You park yourself somewhere. Okay? Bad lighting. And again, I told you I'm not going to go too much into this because that can be an entire course all in itself, but we have to be, and I know it's hard to tell someone that they're shooting in poor light when they really feel that they have a good handle on natural light. So this, I always find a tricky conversation to have with people unless I can have it in depth. No one likes to think that they're photographing in bad light. They like to think that they have a good handle on it. But more often than not, underexposure causes soft images. Underexposure, even the slightest bit of underexposure, will give you a soft image. So I always say here, if your images are looking like this out of the camera, and this might be an extreme case, this is poor light. This image is soft for no other reason than poor light. That's it. If this image was shot in better lighting than this, better natural lighting than this, you don't need a reflector or a flash. You just need to seek out the correct lighting. She would have been sharp as a tack. I like to tell people to envision the images before you capture them. When you envision the shot before you capture it, it will actually eliminate a lot of this because you'll seek out better light, but envisioning the image before you capture it. Seems like I need to make that plural, I don't know why. But if you envision it first, it will tell you how to set that shot up. Okay? And when you set that shot up, you already know if I do A, it might be blurry. Then therefore I must do B. Things of that nature. So that brings me to how important is your distance. If I'm envisioning my shot before I capture it, I'm already telling myself how close or how far away I need to be based on what I want to capture. And now I'm remembering my slides. I purposely chose smaller kids to kind of give you an example of what I mean by that. So no one can tell me, hey, Audrey, those kids are 15. Therefore, you're not going to encounter what I encounter. So let me show you this. This kid's 2? And this is all unedited. Everything I'm going to show you is unedited so that you can see exactly how it is when I capture it. I think that's the best representation to give anyone when we're discussing capturing sharp pictures. So, I don't know how old dad is, but dad's a dad. But this girl here is 2, and I believe he is 4 or 5. So this obviously is a candid movement. You can tell it's movement by her hair. And I knew I was shooting this at 1.6. So I needed to set myself up, meaning direct the shot, tell dad what to do, and then put myself in the correct position so that I can make sure this shot is sharp. So this is the actual out of the camera crop of this picture. Just to give you some stats here. 1.6, 1 4000 shutter, ISO 320. So, whoops, I already knew. I instructed Dad, hey, I told him to pick his daughter up and swing her in some way. I mean, I didn't tell her to do it upside down. That's why you got to, things look a little bit more organic, but I will tell them what to do so that I can get the picture sharp. I tell parents that, and if you give them the instruction, they know. So he kind of improvised this, but what I did tell Dad is make sure your feet are lined up with his feet. So he's literally telling him, okay, you got to stand right there. I even put I cut out a little circle in construction paper and put it there so that he knew where to step, the 5-year-old. And so then he, did whatever he did in terms of conversing with his son. But I set that shot up. So because I'm shooting at f1.6, my shutter is at 4000, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. I already knew I needed to back up a bit. Now I'm shooting, it doesn't say here, but I was using my 85 millimeter 1.4. I already knew I needed to back up. The closer you are, the more shallow the image, meaning the more shallow the background. The further away you are, the more narrow it becomes. And that's just physics and optics of all lenses. If you're using a telephoto lens and a telephoto lens, prime lens, 85 millimeter, now the new 105, 135s, things of that nature, where when you get into the 50 millimeters, we'll touch more on that in a bit, and anything under, and I'm talking strictly primes, then it's not telephoto. Obviously, if you're using zooms, if you're on the low end, let's say a 24 by 70, 24 millimeter lens, the 24 millimeter end is obviously wide angle. Then when you get down to the 70, it becomes more telephoto. So when you're using a telephoto lens or you're at the telephoto end of a zoom lens, you need to be more careful because it makes the shallow depth of field more blurry, for lack of a better description. One other thing that I like to have is depth behind my subjects. The more depth I have behind the subjects, the more shallow that background. Now listen very carefully. They are about, I would say, a good 15 to 20 feet away from these bushes behind them. So this tells me that background's going to be nice and blurry. However, because of this movement, I have to tell myself, Audrey, you need to back up a bit. But because I've got this nice depth behind them, I'm not losing a lot of the blur that I already want. So combining the background and combining where I stand dictates how shallow this background becomes. So let me repeat. Because I don't have them this close to the background, they've got a nice distance, I'm getting some shallowness. But if I back up, I'm not losing a lot of the shallowness that I would normally lose if they were as close to that background. Rewind that part if it doesn't make sense. It's hard to understand it when you first hear it, but just rewind it and it'll make sense. The funny thing about photography is that everything tends to work together. It's like a big circle. Now, even though you've got the exposure circle, we probably really should have a sharp circle, but we don't have one technically. Maybe I should make it up and coin it. So I took this with my iPhone, so you have to excuse the blurriness, but this is where I focused at, and I'm going to get more into that in a minute. But they're all in the same plane. Because they're all in the same plane, and I have a technique that I love to teach because it's easier to get people on a certain path to sharper images by teaching a certain technique. I tend to, go in between the technique I'm going to go over in just a moment. This image kind of represents me stepping out of that technique, but they're on the same plane. The girl is what I call the hero of the image, and that means when someone is viewing it, let's go back here, you're going to view her. Then you get Dad's expression, boy is the third. So I want to make sure she's sharp. Dad and the girl are sharp together. You can see a little blurriness here, but this doesn't matter because this is not the focal point of the image, or what we call the hero. So that's why I chose to focus here. Okay. So as I was going over earlier, what attributes to sharpness while shooting with wide apertures? So obviously focal length, your distance from the subject, and the background distance from the subjects or the people that you're shooting. The photographer technique, so your shooting style and your camera settings. And I feel I've got a slide after this that's going to go more in depth to that, but let's just pretend we don't so I can keep the flow going. So remember I was telling you guys about the, I said I was going to go over the 4000 shutter. Now, let's keep this in mind. And I see this a lot, and it tends to just trip people up because they get so caught up on numbers. The best photographers allow themselves freedom. Okay? Although you see me with these high shutters in the thousands, most of it has to do with the light that I'm in. But I do have a rule. I will not, under any circumstances, go below 1 in 500 for my shutter. I don't care what is going on. If it is a dark day or you're in a dark room, whatever, I'm not going under 500. Every so often you might see me be a rebel about it, but that's very, very rare. Very rare. But staying at 500 ensures that the sharper the shutter, the sharper the pit. Let me study that backwards. The faster the shutter, the sharper the image. Now that does not mean that, hey, let me just crank my shutter up to 5,000 or 4,000 so I can make sure that it's super sharp. It's not like that. It's not where, the more you pile on or the higher you dial up your shutter, the sharper it's going to be. Just have a high shutter or a higher shutter. 500 is a really good rule of thumb. If I have a 500 shutter and let's just say it's still dark, or the picture is still, underexposed looking, and that's not what I wanted, I'll raise that ISO. Remember, my aperture is already wide, so the only thing left that I have to work with would be my ISO. So if I'm in a situation where I don't have enough light, like I said, I'm indoor. I'm just going to give you an example. I'm indoors, and a 1,000 shutter is just obviously too dark. I will go down. The lowest I'll go is 500. And if 500 is still not giving enough light on that lens, I'll crank that ISO up. Okay? So I'm going to talk about different, crops, or if you will. I kind of have a little bit of a recipe that I use. When I started, I was very much into that. Feel like that sentence didn't work. I just literally got off a plane a little while ago, so I kind of have jet lag sentences, I think. But I have a bit of a recipe that I like to do. I start with close-ups, go to full body. Close-ups, go to 3/4 body, then do full body. Or I'll reverse it. I'll do full body, 3/4 body, so that'll get you like right above the knee, and then close-ups. So that way I don't have an entire, session full of close-ups, but that's just kind of my little tip from me to you. So with my close-ups, this is about how far I am. If I'm using my 85 millimeter, I'm a good 5 feet away. Sometimes I do get closer, and I'll show you some examples of that. If I'm using my 50 millimeter lens, obviously I need to move in closer than 5 feet, so that will give me between 3 and 4 feet. 3 feet being the closest that I'll get with the close-up on a 50, because otherwise, not so much sharpness, but mostly distortion. I will start to get a distorted face if I get closer than that. So 5 feet is as close as I'll get. Now, this is important, and this is usually when everybody starts to gasp. The only time I make sure I focus on an eye is if I'm focusing a close-up image. And to be quite honest, this particular picture here is not all of that close. I mean, I do get a little closer, but this is the only time. I'll pick an eye. And I think just because I'm right-handed, I tend to bring my focal point over to the right eye. The right eye is not better than the left eye. I think that's just by pure habit. But this is the only time I make sure I focus on the eye. And this is something that I tell photographers that I actually meet with in person. That's the only time. So if you look at this, that's the eye of the camera crop. And that's unedited. Everything again is unedited. Close up of the eyes. Now, one thing I want to show you, and I know I've got a slide on this. I only care about sharp eyes. Excuse me, that's it. Anything else that's blurry, I personally don't care about. Some people do, and that is okay. I got a slide that's going to touch on that in a minute. And that's where I focused. So you see, this is all straight out of the camera. You've got the back of my camera. Close up of the eye. Actual picture. So you see what I get. And again, this was a good 5 feet away. Now, for you guys who don't like the soft, what I call bits, if you will. So you've got your eyebrow corners. Sometimes if you've got someone who's got really long eyelashes, those will fall out of focus because they are on the same plane with the eyebrow and the nose. A lot of people don't like that. For myself, I tend not to care. And I think people are so used to seeing it in my pictures that you all have kind of, learned not to care, but you hate it in your own stuff. So this is all due to distance. Remember what I told you guys earlier? The closer you are, the more shallow the picture. The further you are, the more narrow, meaning the more in focus. So if you're 5 feet away, using an 85 millimeter exactly like me, you hate this look, back up. Back up a half a foot. A foot might be a little bit too much, but not so much that it's going to make a big difference. But if let's just keep it clean. Instead of saying a half foot, let's just say back up 1 foot. So instead of being 5 feet away, be 6 feet. Move back 6 feet away. This will come sharp. That's literally all it is. You're too close. But those eyes are sharp. So one question I'm always asked, would I ever move closer than 5 feet for a close-up? Yes, I would. Not all the time because I lose too much of the top of the head and you can't get it back because I cut it off when I shot it. But this shows you, I took a screenshot out of my bridge just to show you the sequence of the pictures. And you can see, obviously, I got her eyes closed there. So here's that picture. And the only reason I showed you the bridge is because I no longer had them on my card when I made this keynote. Very rarely I'm moving this close. Like I said, you are pushing the envelope in terms of blurriness. And then I lose that head. And overall, I like to have the top of the head so I know if I want to crop into it or not. There's your close-up. I mean, so close that you can see the bits, from makeup. All right. Here is the one that always throws everyone for a loop. Groups and wide apertures. So again, everything is out of camera. As you notice here, sometimes they are not on the same plane. Sometimes they are. But one thing you are going to always notice, with the exception, as I mentioned earlier, with dad, daughter, and son, I keep everybody touching, and I do this for a reason. This is the technique I'm going to share with you guys that works 100% of the time. I'm going to be that confident. There's not one person who has told me that this technique does not work. It sounds strange because no one teaches it, mostly because no one thinks of it. But once you try it, it works. And I know it works to the point I've gotten that confident is that yes, A, I have not gotten any bad feedback on it, but two, or what I said A, but B, I just did a workshop this past weekend and told them the same thing. I got the same confused look, but then when they did it, they literally look at the back of the camera like, well, it's sharp, and they can't really figure it out. But that's because I took the stress out of finding an eye to focus on to an area that you needed to focus on. So let's get to the point. So you see this picture here. before I even go to that slide, this is the out of camera crop. I obviously wanted some negative space at the top. I shot this in my studio. That is exactly how I wanted the shot. I wanted it exactly like this. Every single expression represents each one of these kids as they are. Now, this is where I focused at. I know you're like, why? Because I use autofocus. Your camera grabs everything as kind of a unit or a blob, if you will. That's why I keep everyone touching. I pick an area where two people are touching. It does not matter which area you choose. I tend to choose the area based on how the image is composed. So, because I composed it like this, I'm standing in front of them. It made sense for me to focus here. If I were on the side, for whatever reason, I probably would have focused here. But I'm directly in front of them. Boom. I'm picking red square area. That's the main reason why I chose it, because of where I was standing, directly in front, and how I composed the picture. But the main takeaway, focus on an area where two people are touching. Your camera is going to see this as one big fat unit. Now, you have to also take that technique and combine it with the things that I mentioned earlier. How close are you? How far away are you? Things like that. All of those things work together for consistent, sharp images every single time. If you listen to that part, you will walk away with sharp pictures. Same thing here. I'm directly in front. I picked an area, and she's got on a sports bra. So anybody who's like, oh, you showed something where her stomach was showing, she literally was like one of those sports bras. So that's why I felt comfortable showing that. Focus on an area, two people are touching. Made sure my distance was correct. I was a good 15 feet away, mostly because I wanted lots of water too behind them. I could have got a little closer, but I would have lost the beach part of it. And I wanted some of this at the bottom. I'm close down to the ground, crouched down exactly how that diagram showed you. And I picked up a lot of that. That becomes shallow because my camera is closer to the bottom. So I wanted that part. There's your out of the crop. You're out of the crop, out of the camera crop of the picture. And you can see, I need another cup of coffee. 1.6 aperture, 8,000 shutter. Again, I'm on the beach, so that's why that shutter was as high as it was. ISO 200. There's my focal point. That's exactly where I focused at. They're right in the middle. I'm not going to take my camera and turn it here because I want to get someone's eye. Then everybody's out of focus. My camera is off balance. You see how that works? I could, let's say I wanted to go, maybe I should have focused here. Or maybe I should pick her eye here or pick her eye. Don't confuse yourself like that. That adds to camera shake. This will free up your life. And more importantly, free up your thinking. Pick an area based on where they're touching, two people are touching, and how you're composing the image. Again, let me just mention this for clarity purposes. I could have been over here. Then I probably would have focused, in that part here, just because of how I was focused. But, I would have never done that because the picture wouldn't look the same. But I'm just saying, I'm not going to be over here in the corner and then, let me get those hands over there. You're too off plane. Okay? Movement images. Now, if you remember, I mentioned here I was a good 15 feet away. And with that and the kids, I believe I said I was another, a good 15 feet away because that was movement. I can start teetering on the 10 feet away depending on if they're moving or not. So I know the only group pictures I've showed you so far were images where there was movement. But you want to increase your distance a little bit by a foot or so if you want to be safe. So if I said, hey, if you're shooting with an 85, be 15 feet away. If you're shooting with a 50, you want to move in a little closer because then you're too far away. And I got a point that I have to, and I always remember it when I start talking about this with the 50 millimeter, but give me one quick second. But if you're 85 millimeter, you're 15 feet away, or 10 feet away. If you're in a 50 millimeter, you move back about 1 or 2 feet. Don't move back 10 feet. Don't go from 10 feet to 30 feet. You know what I mean? Or move 10 feet to 20 feet. Don't move so far back, but just move back a little bit. Just increase that depth, make that depth of field what is technically called more narrow. Move back a little bit. Same thing with off plane. Now, what I did with this, I envisioned my shot, told Dad to pick him up, but we did a pickup on 3. So 1, 2, 3, he picks him up. Little Miss here, she had an attitude at that very moment. She's so cool, though. She wanted to take pictures with friends, so all of this gave her an attitude. So she's turned in a little bit, but just because we had that attitude going on, I wasn't going to tell her to move back. So I already knew I needed to take a couple steps back. So I was really a good 18-ish feet back because I had no idea when she was going to sway in or sway out. Yes, people, tweens move too. Shot of camera crop on that. 1.6 aperture, 5,000 shutter, 250 ISO. Now, same plane. They're all, not moving, standing there literally hearing me snap the shutter. So this is a little bit different. I'm 10 feet away. And as a matter of fact, I think I was a good 12 to 15 just because I wanted more building behind them. I think it's in another slide. Yeah, it is in another slide. I thought I had where I focused at, but it's coming up. So full body pictures, again, get 15 feet. And one quick thing, if you noticed with my full body pictures, all of them, I do not fill the frame with my body. Like, I'm not cropping here. I'm always leaving some space around. So if you are filling the frame up with the full body pictures, don't crop into the frame. Take the picture and fill the frame up with the body. Then take the picture. Don't take the picture far away and then crop into it. Okay? So get 15 feet away. All right, I knew I did it. Again, focus on an area where 2 people are touching. Now, here's something I want to mention that I just have a feeling I don't have a slide on, and I usually just kind of remember it. The one lens that I tend to see struggle the most with full body pictures is the 50 millimeter lens. And here is what I've noticed just by working with photographers. And it could be that lots of instructors don't really use a 50 millimeter as their main lens. They're always using a telephoto lens or maybe even a zoom. I don't think any photographer, well, there's probably 1 or 2, but not a lot, where the 50 millimeter lens is their main go-to lens. What I've noticed is that lots of 50 millimeter shooters, it's a fantastic lens. I started my business with that lens. Shoot like they are 85 millimeter users, meaning they're too far away. And when you're too far away, the body, person, subject, makes up a small part in that frame. And these are digital images we're talking about. And pixels makes up each, subject. If they're so small in the frame, the less pixels make up that subject. If you're closer in the frame, or the subject is closer, it fills up the frame a bit more, you have more information, more pixels to work with, therefore it's a little sharper. My dumb analogy is, if you have a bowl of cereal, say a bowl of cornflakes, and you take some Fruity Pebbles. Says Fruity Pebbles has color, and I'm sure that I've got some foreigners who are like, what on earth is she talking about? So just in case I do, cornflakes are all brown or tan, and Fruity Pebbles, it's all different colors: red, purple, yellow, pink, orange. So if you take the Fruity Pebbles or the colorful cereal, and you just put 10 in there, it makes up a little teeny tiny part of it, right? But then the cornflakes would be the background. But if I take a big handful of Fruity Pebbles or the colorful cereal and put it in a bowl of cornflakes, you see it a lot bigger. It's more to work with. That's kind of how you have to think about this. I find 50 millimeter users, they back up too much. When I teach workshops and someone has a 50 millimeter lens, and it's usually like this. I can have 10 photographers with 85 millimeters or another longer lens. Then I have 2 people who use 50s. They are with the group, or they stand back next to me. And then I usually stop them like, no, we're going to let our telephoto photographers get their shot. Then you guys are going to step back, and then my 50 millimeter users can move in closer, because they need to fill the frame up a little bit more. Okay, I apologize, that was a ramble. Hopefully that made sense. So that's where I focused. So now we're getting towards the end here. And let's talk about lens choice. I like people to be very aware of the lenses that they're using and the results that they're going to get. If you're using a 35 millimeter and wider prime lens, and this is just physics, it's just, there's no way of changing it. The optics of the lens are going to produce sharper images than a telephoto lens. Why? Because the 35 millimeter lenses and wider are unable to capture the depth of field that the longer lenses do. So although you might either, if you're getting blurry pictures with 35 millimeter lenses, more than likely you've got some technique going on, but you're never going to get the blur that the 85 millimeter lenses and other telephoto primes get. Your images are never going to pop off of, as you know, you want that pop. They're never going to get that because you're not going to be able to capture that really shallow depth of field. If you get too close, it looks distorted. 50 millimeter lenses, and now I remembered this slide. It's exactly what I mentioned to you, what I mentioned just a few minutes ago, where you can get that shallow depth of field. You just need to watch your distance. Stop shooting like you're holding a telephoto. You got to move in closer than the average person who's using a telephoto prime. 85 millimeter lenses and other telephoto primes. The issues with those are, again, going to be distance, but usually you're just a little too close. 85 millimeter lenses and other telephoto primes are the ones who are going to suffer the most from camera shake. The longer the lens, and that's really the same thing with zoom lens users. Most zoom users don't use it at the widest end unless they're shooting like a baby, where it's not, the depth of field is not even going to be that big of a deal unless we're talking macro or something like that. But camera shake is going to be the biggest issue. You'll get that depth of field that you're looking for, but you really need to be mindful of your stance and your distance. Okay. Good thing about this is you can keep this video forever, and you can refer back to it. Again, everyone might find that they have different issues or things of that nature, but it's do some practicing. But I really find that the majority of people who take this course either have 2 issues. A, you're not focusing correctly when you're photographing a group or families or things like that. You definitely want to make sure that they're on the same plane, but sometimes they're not, and it's okay. That's when you need to watch your distance. You're just too close. And then 50 millimeter users. You're photographing like you've got a telephoto. So all of the things that I mentioned will definitely yield you sharper pictures. What I'm going to show you next, when we move into the editing part, is how I make images look sharper. And basically it is how I kind of make them pop a little bit. I only do this with full body ones because you really don't see the difference with close-up pictures, in my opinion. I edit by hand, so I can do any number of things to different pictures depending on what happened when I shot them. So I don't use actions or things of that nature that locks me into a box. Being able to edit by hand allows me freedom to change things as I shoot. I mean, even like here, these are close-up pictures, but I need to nail what I need to nail at a camera. So what is this? I'm just going to give you the stats. So 85 millimeter, 1.4, again, see here, 500 shutter. I actually shot this at a 2.0. Now I remember why. I used a 135 right before that. So that's why, and 135 millimeter lens goes to 2.0. But I'm still getting, look at that, I'm still getting all that shallow depth of field. It's important to note not to shoot as wide as your lens will go. Shooting with it, if you got a 50 millimeter 1.4, 85 millimeter 1.4, it's crazy to shoot at 1.4 because your lens is faulty as wide as it will go. I find that there are exceptions when you get into the longer lenses, the 135s, the 200s, my zooms, 24 by 70s, 70 by 200. Those you can shoot as wide. 50 millimeters, no, don't do it to yourself. 85 millimeters, no. Even 35 millimeters, shoot at least a half stop higher. Half stop being 1.6 or 2.0. I would suggest, and I really push for people shooting at 2.0. You gain nothing, really, and you can see that. I'm glad that I pulled this one open. See that? Images are nice and sharp. Eyelashes are nice and sharp. And as you can see here, I don't need to zoom into 100 to see that. Okay? Your people are zooming into 100. Or one thing I learned or noticed when I was shooting at my workshop this weekend, people are taking these full body pictures on the back of their camera and you're zooming all the way into an eyeball. And that's the equivalent of looking at a picture 4,000%. You don't want to do that. That's craziness. It's not enough pixels. Think about that part. All right, let's close that. So here's what I would do when I really want to make them pop off of the picture, and what I do if I want to enhance that sharpness. All right, what's the stats on this guy? All right, 85 millimeter, 1.4, 5,000 shutter, 1.6 aperture, 400 ISO. Let's go ahead and do that. So I do one sharpen and one sharpen only. Get a filter, sharpen, unsharp mask. What always stays the same is my radius, 1.6. It always stays at 1.6. Threshold is always at 0. And that just came from experience only. And I've been doing that, I want to say, since 06, maybe. So that's how I would leave that. What does vary is the amount. I mean, I can go sometimes high or I can go a lot lower. So I think I had that at 111, which I would probably leave. Some people, don't know when to stop or what's your telltale sign. I look at the edges. If the edges are where I want them to be, and I need to visually see the whole picture because when I print it, I'm looking at the whole picture. If that looks like where I want it to be, that's usually where I stop. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. The next thing I'm going to do, and I'm not doing like a complete full edit on this one just because this is just the sharpshooting part and how I enhance it sharply. I am going to go to my lasso tool here. What I want to do is separate these girls from the background. Okay. I'm going to choose my feathering. I'm going to change it to 20. And one thing I forgot to mention, and this applies to when I did the sharpening part 2, is that the images that I am using are from D800. I didn't use any D810 pictures in this video, but the images are large and they rival the size of medium format cameras. So when I just showed you let me just go back just so I can when I showed you, I just went back, so I'm gonna go to filter, sharpen. On sharp mask, my amount might be higher than yours because I've got a bigger picture. I have more pixels to work with, so therefore some of the amounts are going to be higher. Some of the feathering amounts are going to be higher. You need to play with that part depending on how big your image is. The JPEGs on D800 pictures are as big as the raw images on lots of Canon cameras. Okay, so I'm on my feather and I'm choosing 20 pixels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosely lasso the girls. This does not have to be perfect. And if you are wondering, I do use a Wacom pen. I am not well versed on all things technology, so do not ask me which one is the best. I never research things like that. Wait, I didn't do that one right. I don't want it to touch them. But I have no idea which one is the best. I just have I have to look down as I'm tracing the Intellis, I believe is how you pronounce it. But it works. And like I said, I really don't think twice about a lot of that stuff. So now that I loosely lassoed it, I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose layer via copy. And so what this does is it places the girls on their own layer. I'm going to go to my background layer. I'm going to go to, and I purposely chose this picture of them because they're moving. Obviously you can see that they're laughing. So I just want you guys to know that that is possible and they don't always have to be just like perfect and straight and not moving. You know, as you can see, they're all nice and sharp. You can see the hair. See that? Okay. I was a good, like I said, I like to get a little, like I don't fill them up to the frame. So here I know for a fact, because I use this picture a lot, I was a good 15, 20 feet away. I want to say, I don't even believe I'm in a driveway, so I didn't have that much room. I believe I was like good 15. I would say, well, maybe 18, but I know I wasn't as far as 20 because I didn't even get the side like of the houses next door. Okay. So, I'm on the background layer. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to, I'm going to open up an adjustment layer. My half circle, and I am going to go to curves. I can use levels or curves. They both pretty much do the exact same thing. But I'm going to use curves this time. I'm going to take this one little point here, and I'm just going to bring her down a little bit just to darken it some. One thing about curves, well, you know what? It's the same thing. Sometimes you'll catch me using levels just because it's easier for me to deal with. Sometimes with curves, if you don't hit the right point, it can just make everything go berserko. And then I'm going to take the far left point and I'm just going to bring her up some. And all of this is done to taste. The main thing you want to do here is if you want your, background a little more rich, or if you want it more light and airy, it kind of like all depends. I went for a rich look this time, but just in case, let's say you didn't, let's just delete that. Go back to the background layer. I'm going to use levels. It's so easy to do levels. I'll take my middle slider, which is the midtones, and I can just slide it over to the left, and then I'll give me more of a light and airy look. You might want a light and airy look because obviously they're in the snow. So it's kind of like your mileage may vary there, but it's the same exact thing, just depends on the look that you want. So let's just go back and do the richer look. So I did a curves adjustment. I'm just going to bring it down some. And as you can see, when I start to mess around with that, you see, you see the bits here when I did the lasso. Now, before I bring this little, the far left one up, I'm not going to do that yet. I'm going to come back. Let's just clean this up some. And this really should be above. I did that wrong. Ignore that part I just did. Ignore it. I'm going to click on the top layer with the girls. I'm going to click here. This little square with the circle in the middle, this is my layer mask. I know what I'm gonna do. I did something wrong, and for whatever reason, let me just take curves out. For whatever reason, it's not, it did the clippy mask wrong. All right, let's start over, because I'm not filming this video again. There's my joke for the day. All right, let's go back. Let's go to lasso. What I need to do is I needed to create a clippy mask. You guys have to forgive me. I've been speaking at the imaging conference, and that's pretty big. And you're on cue for a entire week. We have to talk to photographers all day long, so I think I'm like decompressing. So we got our girls on their own layer, right? Now, what I want to do is I'm going to take curves, and I only want to darken the background there. And I shouldn't have to do a clipping mask, but you can. And what a clipping mask is it's telling the computer or Photoshop that you only want this curves adjustment to apply here, right? So right click it and you choose create clipping mask. Usually I don't have to do that right at this point. I think I've just been playing around with something and I can't figure it out, and I'm just having a brain fart, so it is what it is. But now I want to clean up the bits here. So I should be able to, yeah. Now I just made the layer mask so I can clean this up. Sometimes you have to like not talk. When you're talking and you're explaining your editing, sometimes it can confuse even the person who's editing. So what I'm going to do now is I am on a nice soft brush. That is a little too big. I'm on black. My foreground is set to black. And I can now just remove all of this little area here. And I'll try to repeat that just in case it confused anybody. Sometimes that part gets confusing. But I'm just going to clean this up here. Usually if I make a mistake like that, I'll do a re-record. But we're already over an hour. So I was like, no way. No problem showing my lack of memory. Now, I'm probably not as graceful as I could be. The snow part, it's all white. So I don't have to go down here because you can't really see it. You know what I'm saying? But if I weren't on the snow, I would go all around the girls, any place where there's texture. Even here in the dirty snow, you can kind of see a little bit. If you make a mistake, like here, you see how I touched her jacket? You can just switch the foreground to white for those who are not familiar with layer masks. And you can clean that up. So white takes away, what you brought, cleans up mistakes. Black is what you do. You can even see here, I made so that you see that. That's me make a mistake. So I can go to white, take that away. Okay. I'm gonna go back to black, just clean up in between here. I would even do it in there, even though I'm kind of going over her hair. The hair is so fine that it doesn't really matter. Sometimes if I'm going over clothing, I don't mind touching it so much, only because it tends to look like a shadow. So like say if I went over her jacket some there, you see that? It tends to look like a shadow. So the beauty of this little editing portion is I don't have to be so precise. I'm just taking it away. Whoops. All right. Now, let me just go back really quick. What I did was I separated the girls, loosely lassoed at 20 pixels. I did right click to place the girls on their own layer. I went to my background layer. I made a curves adjustment layer. Then I hit right click and chose create clippy mask so that whatever I did to the background only affected the background and not the girls. Okay. Now I'm on the girls layer. I would add, some contrast just so that, there's a lot of little fine tuning things that I would do, but it has nothing to do with the whole sharp part. But this does, because if I'm going to add some contrast, when you darken your lines, which I usually do via contrast, it does make the picture appear sharper. So I'm just going to go in and I'm going to add a brightness and contrast layer. I'm going to click here, right click here, right click, create clippy mask, just so that you guys know that I am only affecting that portion of the image. So I'm just going to add a little contrast. Let's close that. Now here's the part that gets tricky because I always forget what I'm doing here. I'm on the background layer, and I could make a new curves adjustment layer, but I think I'm not. Remember I told you guys I was going to do that far right point. I think I might create a new one just for the sake of clarity and just make a new curves. So I said I would lift this far left point here, and this just tends to mat it out a little bit. Okay. And that's just for vanity purposes only. I'm going to click on the girls. I'm not on the adjustment layer, this white part. You don't want to click there, but I'm here. What I'm going to do last is go to filter, other, high pass. And what this does is it's going to sharpen out my lines. Do you see how that is? See that? You don't want it to look like that. That's too much. There's not a rule of thumb in terms of what number I choose. I just tend to eyeball it. If you can see your outlines look a little lighter, you can see that here. There, you can see it kind of on the folds of her jacket. Excuse me. That lets me know I'm in a really good spot. You don't want it so faint, that where it won't make an impact. And this here is just the masking that I did. Don't worry about any of that. So I'm going to click OK. Then you want to switch that from normal to overlay. That's the girl layer. Okay. Now, just for the sake of before and afters, I'm flattening it. And let's go to before, after, before, do it here, before. See how nice and poppy they look? Before, after. And there you go. Now, I would probably tweak some more stuff like white balance, things like that, and just fine tune it and all that, but that has nothing to do with sharp editing. Now, would I do this to every picture? Like I said, not every picture needs it. So, you got to kind of know when to use your tools when you need to use them. But there you have it. So thanks so much, guys. Talk with you soon. Bye.